Thanks, Rach, and thanks everyone for being here. So yeah, it's an honour to moderate this panel with you, these incredible experts. And I guess I'll just kick us off by saying, we're all at this panel and at this event with the understanding that this industry can only change as each and every one of us really commits to anti-discrimination work, be that in all forms, anti-ableism work, anti-sexism, anti-racism, and supporting all different types of gender identities and identities across. Really honoured to be with this panel of experts. And I'll kick us off, Emet. I'll start with you because you're on my right. I'll pass the ball to you. Emet works for the incredible Athlete Ally. And the first question I'll pose to you, and then we can just go around the table, is what is unconscious bias?
There we go. Sorry, unmuting. Here we are. Hi, everyone. Really, really grateful to be here today. So, having this conversation. The way I think of unconscious bias is, it's a stereotype or a prejudice that we may not even know we're holding on to, but it still informs our actions and in a manner that's unfair to specific individuals or to groups of people who are marginalized. So, some examples would be thinking within Athlete Ally's realm and LGBTQ plus inclusion in sport, right? Thinking that gay men aren't good at sports, or that lesbians are good at sports, or that trans athletes have some sort of inherent advantage. These are all examples of what an unconscious bias could look like.
Thanks for that, Emma. And Brandon, I'll pass the ball on to you if you want to give us, your thoughts of what you think unconscious bias looks like.
Well, honestly, I think he covered it pretty well. I think the main thing for me with unconscious bias is like the beliefs that, we may not know we have, but they tend to show up in a lot of our actions, in a lot of our daily actions. And like you said, I think it tends to be a blanket on different groups of people, because we have certain beliefs that are ingrained in us that we're unaware of, and we start to produce our actions in certain ways towards certain groups that are unfair to those groups, because we just have our own blanket beliefs about certain people.
Thanks for that, Brandon. And Kaiya, without further ado, do you want to give the listeners your opinion on unconscious bias?
I mean, it's pretty hard to go after those two. To go third, I feel like they both explained it very, very well. I'll just add, I really think that unconscious bias is so insidious because a lot of the times we don't even realize that we have it. And especially in this space where we're trying to do social justice work, a lot of us want to believe that we're doing everything right. And the fact of the matter is that we're not always going to be perfect, because we do have these really deeply ingrained beliefs, not just from, the specific environments that we grew in. Whether that's, I grew up in a really conservative white place, so I definitely have some unconscious bias that I still work through, but also just as a consequence of the society we grew up in. We grew up in a white supremacist, racist, transphobic, homophobic society, sexist society, and I think that those all are a part of all of us, and a lot of this work is actively undoing that unconscious bias every single day.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And I think, Kaiya, following on for your point, and this can be open, is when people and we exhibit unconscious biases and, someone calls that in, points that out to you, obviously, that's a great moment. And we're really at Women in Soccer really advertising a call-in culture. If someone's maybe said something to offend, like calling that in as opposed to calling it out. So it's really a learning moment for everyone. So what kind of advice would any of you have for that moment if someone potentially calls you in and points out that potentially you've been exhibiting unconscious bias that's maybe been detrimental to others? That can be a tough moment. So what kind of advice do you have for people who are experiencing that? Because we're all on this platform, we're all in this space to learn. So what's the sort of pro tip with that?
Well, I think that the big thing there is that, like, understanding allyship and understanding that, like, it is tough. It's very tough. It's tough for myself when I hear things like Kaiya said. We all have our own biases. I grew up in a similar environment as her. I'm someone who is in anti-racist work, and that's something I'm passionate about. But I understand that I have shortcomings as well. And so, for me, when someone is calling things out, whether it's for me or whether I'm doing it for someone else, I'm not doing it because I want to call you a racist, or I want to point out your flaws. I want to be able to improve the environment that we're working in, right? So, if I go to an organization, I say, your organization is anti-Black. It's not because I simply want to call you racist. I want to address the structures that have been in place and and that you're consciously perpetuating by not being inclusive and not including, certain races or certain genders, things like that. So it's like understanding, like being aware of who you are, the biases that you may have. It's tough to be realistic about that. But once you could start to, uncover that veil and then start to really address some of the issues, as opposed to getting defensive and saying, hey, I'm not personally racist, so then the structure isn't racist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think listening there, Brandon, like you said, is key, and not being defensive and taking that moment to learn. Emmett, I saw you unmute, so feel free to take it away.
Yeah, just want to add, I mean, exactly to your point, Brandon, I think in sort of dismantling our own unconscious bias, the first step is making a conscious decision to listen, to put in that work, right? Rather than getting defensive. To your point, I think listening to understand rather than listening to respond is, one of the key components that's helped me to really just keeping that in mind when someone does say, hey, you said something earlier today that didn't sit well with me, or that came off in some way, and taking a moment to pause and really process what that person is saying, and exactly right, knowing that, sort of assuming best intentions, right? It's not that someone's trying to call me out, it's that I am causing some sort of harm. And if I do want to call myself an ally or an accomplice, I actually have to understand what they're saying, so that I can do better in the future.
Yeah, again, going third, it's hard to follow up, but I think something that we sort of lose in this conversation a lot is that allyship is not, it's not about how you feel in doing this work. It's about how you are able to best support the communities that you are trying to support. And so I think for me, even though I do sit at those intersections of some marginalized identities as a woman, as a Black woman specifically, there are things that I'm not going to know as a straight cis woman. And I think, or a non-disabled woman. So I think that there are places where you just sort of have to realize your place in the world, and you have to realize that it's not your space to speak up on. And I think you have to really follow the lead of the leaders and the activists and the everyday people in the community who are doing the work and are already on the ground and making change and progress. That's been something for me that I think I've definitely had to grow into, because I feel like when you're doing quote unquote activism, you feel this be doing the right thing, and it can be really uncomfortable to feel like you're making a mistake. But I think at the end of the day, as long as Emmett said, we're assuming good intentions. As long as you have good intentions and you're putting in the work to learn from any past mistakes that you make, I think that is the mindset that we should have in sort of dismantling unconscious bias and in doing social justice work. But yeah, I think really just realizing you're going to mess up and being okay with that, and being okay with the fact that you will have to listen and learn from other people who know what they're talking about, in order to progress. So that's my take on that.
Thanks so much. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, you've touched upon my next question, which is about how can anti-discrimination work really help us untangle our own unconscious biases. But I'll ask Kaiya, as an individual, like you touched upon, but also as an organization, you all work for organizations that are really rooted in allyship and dismantling discrimination. So how does doing this work for ourselves on a personal level also help us implement, anti-discrimination work in everything we do for our organizations?
Yeah, I think, doing the work for yourself is the first step. I think that was what was really emphasized, especially after 2020, in sort of all the intersections of the racial reckoning, with COVID. I think people really realized that doing the work for themselves is the start of any real change. I think the more that you are able to heal and learn, you're then able to take those thoughts and feelings and actions to your organizations. And I think that's how we're going to make organizations better. I think it's important that you're not carrying those unconscious biases with you into the work that you're doing. And I think the starting point for any sort of work in this space is doing it within yourself. And I think that, we all work for organizations that really try and uphold the values and diversity and equity, but there are blind spots. There are always going to be blind spots. All of us have blind spots. And I think that the more work that we do individually to sort of remedy those blind spots, the better off the organizations are going to be.
Yeah, I would say systems are built by people and systems are dismantled by people. And likewise, organizations are built by people and they're driven forward by people and they can be stalled by people. Right. And so if the individuals within an organization aren't willing to recognize their own weaknesses, right. And, unconscious bias can be seen as a weakness. And so not being able to address that and then not being able to address your organization and what your values for your organization are and does diversity and inclusion play a part in that? Not being able to address that individually is not something that you can address as an organization. And so if, each and every person isn't willing to really look at themselves and say, where are my blind spots? Where are my weak points that need to be addressed? If that's not my strength, who in this organization is providing that strength that's going to benefit this organization and really put diversity and inclusion at the forefront? I don't think, if individuals aren't willing to do that, then organizations aren't going to do it as a whole. And the systems that have already been created are going to continue to be perpetuated.
Absolutely. So I guess what we're hearing there from both Kaiya and Brandon, who are both with the Anti-Racist Soccer Club, is that you as an individual need to do the work on your own to bring that to an organization, because you're not going to have a positive impact on a larger structural thing like an organization if we're not individually doing that own, anti-discrimination work. Emet, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, they both said, a lot of what I was thinking exactly. Just like I was saying before, it's tough going third. But I think, one thing that's very specifically helped me in uncovering my own unconscious bias and really interrogating myself, as they were saying, is just questioning my motivation for everything. Of if I have some sort of reaction to something someone said, why is that my reaction? Is it something that is rooted in some sort of stereotype that society is perpetuating? Is it because, or if I'm uncomfortable, why am I uncomfortable? What's making me feel this way? And really getting to the root of what my motivations are. What are the very basic ideas that are underpinning what I'm thinking about or feeling or wanting to do, and really making sure that that I'm actually upholding the values that I say I want to uphold. So one example would be like when I'm a trans man, and when I transitioned, I felt like I had to prove my masculinity, prove that I was a man, and I also said that I was a feminist. But I found myself sort of falling into this trap of toxic masculinity and embodying traits that I don't, as a feminist, want to embody. And so when I started doing more work within the feminist realm and thinking about the privilege that I hold as a man, I was learning more about myself and learning to step back and really, acknowledging that, first of all, I don't have to prove my gender to anyone, but also that my reasons for doing certain things were not actually the values that I want to have or want to display to other people around me.
And Pip, I just wanted to add one thing, because you said there doing the work on your own, and I kind of want to be clear with people, it's not something that you have to do on your own. It's something that you have to be willing to do, but I don't think you need to do it on your own. Your unconscious biases weren't built on your own, and I don't think that they're going to be dismantled on your own as well. I think that organizations like Athlete Ally, organizations like Anti-Racist Soccer Club, that's our goal, is to help with education, is to help with the changing of the tide of how things have normally been done. And so I don't think it's one of those things where you have to be sitting at home and you're you realize, oh, I have these stereotypes that are within me that I use on a daily basis. How am I going to address them? because that's where people get overwhelmed, and it turns out, it ends up where they end up not doing the work because they don't know where to start. Right. So I think utilizing organizations, whether it's an organization within the current company that you work for, or whether it's an organization outside like Athlete Ally or something like that, I think those would be key for individuals and organizations to start to address some of these issues.
Great, Brandon, thanks so much for that clarification. Absolutely. It's, committing ourselves to doing this work, but yeah, absolutely, like leaning into organizations and doing this together, getting the help, getting the advice to unlearn all these things is crucial. And Brandon, earlier on at the start of the panel, you said it plain and clear, like allyship is hard. And Emmett, you were just talking about that moment where potentially you've said something or something's happened, you feel uncomfortable. And I think it's great advice. Moment to pause and sit with the reasons why you're maybe thinking in a certain way rather than just reacting, because that often just exacerbates the situation. My follow-up question to any of you, because it's unfair to always go last, is when you're working on a team of people with diverse perspectives, where age, abilities, race, gender identities, what tips do you have for really fostering an environment that means we maybe don't all know the answers of everyone's experience, but we're constantly learning how to best understand and support each other?
I'll start this one off. That just made me think of not just in like a work environment, but in my friend groups as well. My friends get so annoyed with me when we go out because I'm always the one that when I'm drinking, when I'm not drinking, I'm going to call out racism, I'm going to call out sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and it gets me into these scuffles. And they're like, why do you always have to argue? And I think my tip for people is that you have to hold each other accountable. It's not malicious. It doesn't have to be malicious. It doesn't have to be combative, but you do need to hold people accountable at all points. Every time you see it, you need to call it out. And I think that's one of the ways that we can best uphold these values for each other. Because again, as I said before, like you're not going to get it right every single time. And kind of adding on to what Brandon said, like you don't have to do that unlearning alone. And I is holding people accountable, whether that's in your professional life, whether that's in your personal life. Try and make that commitment to yourself to always uphold the values that you hold dear and always uphold the values of inclusion and diversity and equity and equality in all facets of your life. And I think, when we think of, the framework of an individual doing the work and then that transferring to the organization, I think that same framework sort of holds when if you're doing it in your personal life, then that can also transfer to your professional life. And I think it becomes a lot easier to make a habit of being inclusive and to make a habit of undoing your unconscious bias. So my tip is always call out, injustice when you see it. It's been a habit of mine and it's worked out pretty well.
Retweet to that, Kaiya. Absolutely. Always there to make that statement and just make it a daily practice all the time. Brandon, Emmett, is there anything else you'd like to add on that front?
I think just going off of what Kaiya said earlier, just about understanding that, everyone has their own experiences in life. We're talking about in a group setting, a diverse group. Everyone has different experiences and everyone has a different view on life. And that doesn't make anyone else's experiences invalid. It just means that I don't personally understand Kaiya's experience or Emmet's experience because I haven't been through it. But that doesn't mean that what they're saying doesn't have value and doesn't have merit. And so being able to understand that and look at things from a different point of view, not from a black male point of view, but what Kaiya has gone through and her struggles and what that means in terms of how she reacts to things and how she works in a group setting. I think being able to understand the people around you and look from a different point of view other than just yours is really crucial in a group setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with both of Kaiya and Brandon said. And I think, for me, the biggest way that I found myself in these situations, keeping, clear of where I want to be headed is just leading everything with empathy, right? We're all human. And that's the key for me is rather than, seeking to respond to folks or rather than getting defensive, any sort of reaction I have, leading with empathy and really, even if I'm not going to understand, for example, where Kaiya or Brandon are coming from, because to Brandon's point just now, I'm not them. I don't have the same identities that they hold. There might be some overlaps, but I don't have their same life experiences. And so if I lead with empathy, then I'm seeking to understand their emotions, and that will help me uncover and dismantle, the biases that I have inside myself, and therefore to be able to work, within the systems that these unconscious biases exist. Sorry, my dog is going crazy over here.
Dogs are also always welcome. Thanks for that add-on, Emmett. And in the last 5 minutes of this panel, to pose to you all as well, what tips or advice do you have for us about how we can encourage our organizations to implement anti-discrimination policies and work on unconscious bias? I'll throw out there, to start with, you would engage with the work of the Anti-Racist Soccer Club and Athlete Ally, but then I'll let you all take it away. Any tips you have for us all to take to our individual organizations and try get this good work going in the industry.
I think the main thing for me is just be persistent. The way I try to address a lot of things with some of the conversations that I have with larger organizations who are kind of reluctant to do a lot of this work. We're talking about businesses. The big thing is the bottom line, right? So being able to provide them with statistics of how diversity impacts your organization, how diversity impacts the new markets that you reach and the customers that you retain and that you work with. So like being persistent and being able to show them like the value of what diversity brings to an organization and the value of doing work like this that will help, create an environment that is more productive for everyone involved. I think just being persistent with that, continuing to have those conversations, and strength comes in numbers. So being able to have the people around you who understand the work that you want to do, are passionate about the same work that you want to do, and hopefully that can, the persistency around that can start to make a change within an organization.
I think exactly to your point, Brendan, about being persistent. One thing is that education is a starting point, not the end goal. But I think that's something that we all should be continuing to do, educating ourselves. I think sort of like any organization or institution, one thing is to have set touch points, right? So thinking about like in your hiring practices, what ways are you seeking to diversify your candidate pool? Are you posting job openings in specific, groups that have a diverse population there already? And then in your onboarding, or as a coach, or with a team, as you bring on recruits and new players, how are you talking to them about things like race, sexual orientation, gender, ability, faith, all of these aspects of our identities? How are you talking about those and building inclusive practices from day one when a new person arrives? And then I also just wanted to address real quick, I saw a question in Q&A, as a content creator to be a better ally, I would say uplift the voices of people who are experts in whatever field that is, right? Like Chris Mosier is a phenomenal, advocate for trans inclusion, queer inclusion in sports. Sharing his posts, talking with him about, collaborating on something. That's one way to really use your platform to uplift other platforms as well.
Yeah, my tip, I would say, just sort of going off of the end of what Brandon said, I think we all can see the power of collective action. And I think we all recognize that sometimes these battles are difficult to fight on your own. I've done it. I don't like doing it. It's better when you have people who share your values and your end goals. And so I think doing your best to find people who are like-minded and who want to see the same progress that you do, I think is a great way for you to help organize within your organization. Especially when we're talking about corporations, those people do not like any sort of change of the status quo. And so I think the more people that you have, and the more that you can put into collective action, the more powerful the message and the more progress will be made.
Thanks for that, Kaiya, and apologies for a slight tech malfunction that chucked me out right there. But yeah, thank you all. I'll start to wrap us up so we're on time with this. But I think what we've heard from the conversation is us each individually really committing to this work and then working together, engaging with organisations, having conversations about this anti-discrimination work to implement across the board. Kaiya, I really liked your advice about making it daily. Commit to just constantly, calling in people, making everything more inclusive as a daily practice. And Brandon, I think that was a great tip about, getting it to organizations to implement structural change is, presenting the facts, the business facts. It's great to have diverse voices in this space. And that's a really useful tool that we all need to be engaging with. And Emmett, that was a brilliant tip, of course, about allyship as well. Like if it's an experience that you're not sure of, especially in a content creating realm or something like that, is retweeting, sharing, uplifting the voices of others is always a great way to go. And I'll just leave. I see Rach jumping back in, so we must be right on time. And I'll just say thank you all for joining the panel. It's really an honour from women's soccer's point of view to have all of you from Athlete Ally and the Anti-Racist Soccer Club and Common Goal. We really respect and appreciate all the work you're doing in the space. So thanks everyone for joining this panel.
And I will just quickly, before we do pivot, and Brandon, I'm sorry to jump in before you could chime in there. There was a great question in the chat, and I'd love to point it to you, Kaiya. It could be answered by everyone, but just to be conscious of time. It says, per Kaiya's comment about allyship not being about you, not being about me personally, right? In your personal journeys, what have you found are effective emotional strategies for yourselves for actually being able to counter defensiveness or guilt? Maybe it's a longer form answer. Maybe we follow up with some more details on that, but maybe a quick note on that, Kaiya.
A couple things. Me personally, I talk to myself. I have a cat now, so I can talk to my cat, but I like talking myself through my emotions. It's one of the ways. I'm like a very anxiously attached person. Not anxious, but for whatever reason in relationships, I'm anxiously attached. So I use strategies sort of talk myself down from feeling emotionally elevated. And I think that's one of the ways that I do it, kind of what Emet was talking about earlier, like where is this discomfort coming from? Why am I feeling this way? And then, trying to be really rational about it and take the emotion out of it is something that really helps me. And then also, I think it's very clear that I'm a very open person. I sort of share my whole life on social media. And I think for me, that's also been one way, just being very, very open about everything and calling myself out when I need it is something that I do personally that works for me in making sure that I am, addressing these issues well and that I'm holding myself accountable to the same standards that I want to hold other people to.
Just one quick point to that. I would just add, simply shut up and listen, right? I do that for myself whenever I'm called out. Like everyone wants to respond. Everyone wants to be so quick to respond. And, even if you're not talking, you're listening to respond and counteract the point. Just sit there and listen, right? I realize, like, when it happens to me and I get that feeling inside of me where I just want to respond because I don't agree with it, but I'm not able to hear what the other person is saying. I think it's really important. It's really tough, but it's really important to just be quiet and listen and take in the feedback that you're getting.
Amazing. Emet, Brandon, Kaiya, Pip, thank you so much. It's really important to have these conversations. They're at the foundation of change.